Hello there. Welcome back to the wonderful world of everything Transformers Generation 1. I'm your host, Mega Ginge. This week's episode is all about Transformers Origins. There are two main origin creation stories for Transformers. One which was set in the cartoon universe, and one which was in the Marvel UK and US comic universe, both set in the 80s, and which actually are they're both canon. I like them both. I have my own personal favourite, but these are the Generation 1 origin stories from Generation 1, and I'm going to tell you both of them now. The first one is from the cartoon. It gets explained to us in Season 3, Episode 4, The Five Faces of Darkness, when Rodimus Prime, at the sarcastic suggestion of Springer, short-circuits himself to find out why the Quintessons pretty much hate all Transformers. So he goes into the Matrix, travels back in the Matrix, and communicates with one of the first Autobot Primes, with one of the first avatars he sees. And it turns out that Cybertron, back in prehistory, Cybertron was created by the Quintessons as a factory to create consumer goods and military hardware, both product lines being, of course, robots. The lineal ancestors of both the Autobots and the Decepticons. No three guesses for who the military hardware were the ancestors of. Eventually, the Quintessons became too lazy and greedy to do the work themselves. So what do? They imbue the Transformers, or at this point just sentient robots, with an artificial intelligence, with an artificial sentience. So they could do the work themselves, they could just build more of themselves. And that was pretty much it. That was the downfall of the Quintessons. Once they knew sentience, once they had a concept of freedom, they knew that they didn't have it. They knew the difference between freedom and slavery, and they didn't like it. The Quintessons used these robots as well for entertainment in gladiatorial-style arena pits, where some tried to stand up for themselves and attack the Quintessons head-on. This never worked. They were always killed by their executioners, aptly named. Eventually, everything came to a head when you've got one force enslaving another. You have a rebellion on your hands. This doesn't go into too much detail here, but in the season 3, there's another season 3 episode where it explained a bit more, and it actually involved time-travelling Autobots from the future coming back into the past through no circumstance of their own to take part in a paradox situation. Blaster was one of the Autobots, Rick Gar, the Junkion, Blaster's cassettes, I think Blur was there, and they appeared because of a Quintesson plot to actually stop the rebellion in the first place, actually creating the predestination paradox and actually setting in motion what they were trying to avoid in the first place. They tried to remove a figure from the past called A3, Alpha-Trion, who was the rebellion's leader. That failed, and thanks to the help of the present-day Autobots, was made so much worse because they actually inflicted more damage than they would have. A3 was obviously eventually returned to his own time, where he used the Autobot Codex, just an Autobot symbol, to shut down the Dark Guardians, the predecessors to the Guardian robots from the Season 2 episode War Dawn. Once the Quintessons were defeated, they fled, they left this factory. And for a time there was peace. Both sides got along well, they started to build up their civilization. It didn't last. No three guesses who started the war. Rodimus is being told this story by a lineage of primes, from the first prime all the way up through to his predecessor, Optimus Prime himself. We never really heard about any former Decepticon leaders. It was like put into the lore, and it was shown in War Dawn basically that it looked like Megatron was the man who started the Decepticon revolution. This is not the case. It shows you actually at least one previous Decepticon leader, a pink and red Transformer, who I think transformed into a motorbike. It's also shown in Transformers the movie that as Starscream is standing on the coronation platform, there are statues of what I assume are previous Decepticon leaders, all in gold. That's when Rodimus turns around, and here's Optimus Prime explaining the last part. Orion Pax fated to become Optimus Prime, and the war stretched on to this day. And that's pretty much Origin 1, that's the TV Origin. I'm not going to lie, it's not my favourite. There's nothing really to it. It's basically like there was no purpose to their creation at all. Just like the quintessence, they're lazy and greedy. The second one was created in the Marvel UK comic first by the writers because they wanted a way to describe Unicron's backstory, which very much tied in to the creation of the Cybertronians, the Transformers. And in the UK comic, Unicron himself is explaining this to a bounty hunter named Death's Head. If you know, you know. Eventually it was agreed, okay, you made this because we didn't have any proper creation lore yet in the TV series, we'll keep it. Since that comic was around about the same time as Transformers the movie had came out. So we hadn't got a season 3 yet. And people were just, they enjoyed it. They enjoyed this new backstory. And eventually it was adapted into the US comic as well, but this time from the perspective of Unicron's adversary, Primus himself. I have here, we'll just call it one of the covenants of Primus. And I'm pretty much just going to take it straight from here. Eventually, Unicron in the old universe destroyed everything. And he could finally rest. While he slumbers, old parts, old remnants, atoms and particles of the old universe all come together and create the Big Bang, which leads to the creation of our own universe. And when Unicron wakes up again, what does he find? A universe thriving with life, a young universe. So he goes about destroying it, as you do. Good, because that's his purpose. He is officially the god of chaos. Here, it's not as simple this time. The sentient core of this universe, alert to the threat that Unicron actually poses, has created a guardian. The guardian being Primus, the head honcho, he who would go on to create the entire race of Transformers. So, Unicron now has someone he can play with. So he goes on, and he does. He creates chaos to lure Primus. Primus fights him, and Primus, though he has a match for Unicron, he is not happy with the result. Things are destroyed during their battles. Basically, Unicron's still getting his way. The only difference is he's getting to have fun now because he's got a playmate. So eventually, once Primus himself is exhausted physically, his body is pretty much destroyed, he goes into the astral plane and fares no better there against Unicron, who also follows him in. And it's there that the plan is hatched. It's there that Primus comes up with this great scheme, dashing back towards the real world, our world, with making sure Unicron is hot in pursuit. He takes him back to the physical plane, our plane, but not into their old bodies, into 2 barren metal asteroids. I'm just going to read it straight from here now. Eons passed until finally Unicron discovered he could psychonically change his metal prison, able to transform between robot and planet. Unicron continued his orgy of destruction. Primus, aware of Unicron's escape through a mental link that they shared, that's never explained as to why they suddenly got a mental link. He also shaped his prison into the planet Cybertron. He populated it with beings designed to mimic Unicron's transformation abilities, arming them with a genetic matrix formed with his own life essence. They are the last line of defense against Unicron. They argue they are the Transformers, and that's Primus basically talking to every Autobot Decepticon assembled at this point. They are both considered canon by Generation 1 fans. The cartoon confirms one that's canon. In the comic version, both in the UK and US comics, both confirmed as canon as well, so you take your pick. I personally am not gonna lie, and people might say I'm a traitor to the show because I'm saying this, but I prefer the comic version. It shows that, like I said, they had a purpose, they had a meaning. There was a point to the whole thing. I go on now just to tell you my own personal theory here. All the events which happen in the comic book there, all the way up till the barren asteroids. Now we know that the Quintessons are ancient beings. We know that Primacron from Call of the Primitives is also an ancient being. And I think there is a comic out there, I think there's a BotCon or maybe a TFCC comic from ages ago that confirmed this part at least, that the Quintessons knew Primus had come through from the astral plane. He'd taken this giant metal asteroid as his prison, and I think they knew that maybe they couldn't pinpoint it for a while, but eventually they did, and created Cybertron. And I can actually see it in my head. It's like this little comic panel. It's basically them talking about owning their own god, but there's not a chance in hell that's Unicron because he answers to no one. My personal theory on this is, once the Quintessons possibly recruiting Primacron as well, because it's confirmed in Generation 3 that he built some of the primitives, which means they could just be ancient Autobots and Decepticons who are in this TV series restructured and reformatted, coincidentally, into beast forms. Because obviously not all the beasts were present, so it very well could be that. But I think once Primacron had helped in the creation of Cybertron, hear a calling, hear that kind of faint echo in his mind, and he set off to look for the other asteroid, which by this point was hundreds, thousands, possibly light years apart. And obviously, in Call of the Primitives, we find out that his workshop in probably where he built Unicron, was in the centre of the galaxy, very far from Cybertron. So obviously the asteroids have been floating apart for a long time. I think he goes there and he builds up his little base, he starts building creations, and he makes them bigger and bigger until he creates the monstrous Unicron. Why would someone do that? I'm thinking Unicron was in his head. I think Unicron wanted the body, but he couldn't do it himself. I think he required Primacron to mechaform the whole structure and then do the insides so he could transform into his secondary robot mode. He turns on him and leaves him for dead. Obviously Primacron doesn't die. And then he goes off in search of Cybertron. It would take millions of years for him to scour, even in a reasonably straight line, towards Cybertron. And obviously, he stopped to eat probably quite a lot. If you saw a map of the galaxy, the Transformed universe, if you zoomed in, you'd probably find a line of absolutely nothing going from the centre, slowly making its way to Cybertron. But he was basically eating stuff that entire way, the entire time. Then that takes you straight into the Generation 1 cartoon. That's my personal theory, just to connect the two. But, let me know in the comments what you think. And next time, a little teaser, we shall be discussing the Autobots. We shall be discussing the lineage of the Primes, and more importantly, the most well-known Autobot leaders of all time, Optimus Prime, and even his, direct descendant, I suppose you could call Rodimus Prime. And we'll discuss all that in the next episode of The Ginger Transformer. Once again, everyone, stay safe, Primus bless, unless you're a Unicron supporter, in which case, all hail Unicron. Roll out, my friends.